Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it to. I'm Bushka on Blitz. Got a bit of a sore throat today. I had rehearsals last night. I was singing for my supper at the in the studio, loving life, living large. This is the T34-85 Rudy. It's a Tier 7 Russian medium tank. It's a premium, and we're going to have a chat about that today. But before we do, want to highlight a couple of things. Press the bloody subscribe button, you clowns. More subscriptions is better. Make sure you like the videos. Follow me on Twitch and or YouTube if you want to watch the streams. There's one coming up today. I'm just doing the video for it now. And Twitter at Bushka on Blitz if you want to follow me there. I've also got a Facebook page. And if you want to support the channel, become a Patreon. There's lots of cool Patreon-only stuff going on out there at the moment. There's a podcast and a video every week. What have we got going for us in the Rudy? Well, a hell of a lot. I'd forgotten about this tank, which is a crime and a travesty in itself, because it is low-key one of the most OP, never really talked about tanks in the game. And I want to run through why, what it does, why it's so good, and maybe extrapolate on that just a little bit so that next time you get the opportunity to buy this thing, you really seriously consider it. And next time you come up against it in battle, you have a little bit of an idea of what you're dealing with and how you should play against it. Firstly, for a tank with this much mobility, it has an awful lot of armour. And we're going to break down the armour profile later, and I'll take you through that in a quick little burst and let you see. But it is a very mobile tank. You can get this thing up to about 63, 64 degrees of traverse once you get all the bells and whistles on it, and if you use it as a recipient of your very, very valuable spare parts. Wouldn't it be nice to have a few more spare parts? And that's very agile indeed, and it's more than capable of going around tanks like that Ferdinand. What it also has going for it is one of the highest damage per minute outputs at Tier 7 for a medium tank. There's only two other tanks that are better than it, and both of them have nearly identical stats in terms of DPM. They both run 76mm or 75mm guns, the Comet and the T34-85, or the Nomad as it was called when it was first sold with a special camo. And they're both gun depression tanks, and that's all well and good. Where they differ from the Rudy's about 180 damage per minute behind them. So basically, it's like a round behind them per minute. It still gets 13.4 rounds when fully kitted out running rammer, which is a phenomenally good amount for a tank that's running an 85mm gun. That means you have 200 alpha, as opposed to the standard 160 alpha on most of the speed demons that do the big DPM at this tier, like Swiss, as you can see there in the E25, like the Comet, like the T34-85 Nomad, like the Panther. All those tanks, like the Chi-Ri, they're all running 75mm guns. There's only a few notable exceptions that run bigger guns, and they have lower damage per minute numbers, because the key to bigger guns is that you use them in a peek-a-boom playstyle. And to do that, you have to pull out like this, you shoot, you push back in, you hide, you wait till your reload goes off, and then you go again. With tanks like the E25 that you can see Swiss in there, you have to push out and be on target, physically visible, to do your damage. The Rudy gets to do both. It has a bigger alpha damage, but it also gets over 13 rounds a minute, nearly 13 and a half rounds a minute. So it can both do peek-a-boom playstyle very successfully, because it gets 40 more alpha, which is 25% more shell damage every shot than, say, a Comet or a Panther or any of those guys. And yet, it's still capable of, when the need arises, perma-tracking a tank, or just dropping pure DPM bombs, because it can also dish out huge amounts of damage. So it wins there in both facets of the game. And that's really key, because it means you can still contribute to the team even when you're not able to just be absolutely time on target heavy and you've got a lot of free open shots, which is what you do with the Comet, but you do it with the Comet using the gun depression. The Rudy's still got 8 degrees of gun depression. What the Rudy has is armor. If you take this tank, if you angle it up to about 25, 28 degrees, and you put the gun over the front edge of the area between the tracks and the actual upper glacis, you will find a tank that can bounce shots reliably at about 150 millimeters. Now, you have weak points on the front, but you're a medium tank. So seriously, like, you should have some weak points. And it means you get to use hills like this that have very, very steep angles on them, and you come out and there's a hill there and there's the front of a Rudy and they're in the same line, and it means it's very, very tough to pen on these kind of situations, in these kind of situations. And it's why I think this tank is an amazingly good trainer for a tank like the Object 140 or the T62A, because they run, or the T54 or the Type 59 or the T54 lightweight or the T44, all those tanks run that same kind of playstyle where you're looking for hills to angle your armor up on very severely and then do the business. And did you see that? That was nearly 300 damage, that HE shell, because you've got an 85mm gun, and you actually, with your 85mm gun, end up having 44mm of HE pen, just base. So you can do decent damage with your HE when you get the opportunity. So it's bouncy, it's got great damage per minute numbers, and when angled correctly, it has good armor. Now, that armor is situational. You have to angle to get it. And there are opportunities you can use that 8 degrees of gun depression, which isn't amazing compared to other tanks in the tier. Like the Comet, for instance, gets 12 degrees of gun depression, and the T34-85 gets 10 degrees of gun depression. Now, those numbers are better, but what the Comet and the T34-85 don't get is that 200 alpha. So you get a little bit of what makes them so special, and in addition to that, you also get an armor profile that can be a little bit more aggressive, and fairly strong turret too, it must be said. Is the tank mobile? Bloody oath. Yep, got that going for it too. If you've driven the Comet a lot, you'd know, and I'm comparing it to the Comet because I find the Comet to be the high watermark for tier 7 mediums. I love that tank. I think it is brilliant. It's got a fairly strong turret. It's got outstanding gun depression. It is very, very agile, very mobile, crazy good DPM. And yet, I think the Rudy may be better in the current meta. The only thing it really falls down on, which a lot of the tier 7 mediums fall down on, is its penetration numbers aren't amazing. But at 144 pen, you're going to see me in most of these videos, at tier 7 anyway, dealing very comfortably with the opposition using just 144mm of pen. Now, that ISU 152 is a big thorn in the side, and we've got to get rid of him very, very quickly. See how I'm always angling up my tank? It makes a big difference. Really big difference. The tank looks really cool too, by the way. It looks very, very cool. So let's get back to the mobility. Horsepower to weight ratio on this tank. It's pretty good, 20.5. It's right up there. It's not as good as, say, the Edelweiss or the Comet, but you still manage to clock out at 54 kilometers an hour, and you can get it up to 64 degrees of traverse, and, you know, you got a 660 horsepower engine, so you're not mucking around. You've got guts. You're not a Dracula. The Dracula is the ridiculous one at this tier with a 40-ton horsepower to weight ratio. I mean, and I'm not really including the Drac too much in these conversations because the Drac is a super rare tank. You will see a lot of people driving it, but you had to grind that tank in an event, and that event was quite a while ago. So you haven't been able to get it in containers and things since, but yeah, it's not really your standard. It also doesn't go near this thing in terms of damage per minute. This thing poos all over it, and it's got the same kind of gun. It's got an 85mm versus the Drac's 90mm, so you get 200 alpha versus 225. Now, your armor is not impervious. Versus good TDs and things, you can get your armor up to, you know, the 150s, which is excellent versus other mediums and light tanks. But it's not going to do the business versus proper TDs. You will still get bounces because, you know, the game is the game, and the meta's changed, and premium ammunition is now used less, and that means that armor is a lot more. You get a lot more surplus value from armor than you used to get, which is really important to remember. And so tanks like the Rudy have really come into vogue. Now, it is not what you'd call a pure gun depression tank, but 8 degrees of gun depression is pretty bloody good for a Russian. And as I mentioned, it is an excellent training tank. And not only that, it makes money. Now, it's most often compared, surprisingly enough, with the T34-85 Victory, which is very, very similar in style and looks. The 34-85, the 43, the Rudy, the Victory, the T34, they all look very, very similar. That very Soviet block, mass engineered. I mean, it looks workmanlike. It looks like it is a tool built for a purpose, and it doesn't have any flounce, any flourish, any extravagance, any excess metal on it. It's just an efficient slab of stellinium love that gets the job done. Now I'm going to show you this one last game as we have a look at this. You're going to see this is from the other side, and I'm going to use this area again. I'm going to set up the tank. I'm pulling back because obviously I don't want to take shots from over there. Counting the targets, our bulldog goes very, very aggressively. I don't know what he is doing there. That is quite a poor decision on his part, but we make hay from that hit point pool that he's sacrificing to the enemies, and Stalin gives great thanks, and we slaughtered a bottle of vodka and drank it in his honor, and we put a couple of shots in. Wouldn't have got one in that Chi-Ri if he hadn't have driven straight on down hard and heavy. And now we're reversing up because there's me and a heavy here, and I want to make sure that I've got the most opportunity to put damage in without taking damage back. Now the Rudy's good for situations like this where you can get on a hill and it needs a little bit of gun depression, but gun depression isn't its primary attribute. So you can use the 8 degrees, but you're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to miss shots because of your gun depression in a situation like this. It can't ridge fight successfully like a Comet does, but it can certainly put good shots in. And it's that 200 alpha that you're talking about there. It doesn't go in. We only get 150, low roll, but we certainly get a good roll there, and we finish him off altogether, and then we pop out here. And that 200 alpha means finishing a tank off is a whole lot easier. And next thing you know, we're down into the Chi-Ri, and there's another 200 alpha shot, and we can hold serve with a Chi-Ri. We can do more damage per minute than a Chi-Ri can, and he's got to wait on a clip. So if you find him on the end of a clip, wow, you can absolutely punish them. So you've got to see, if you raise the tank up just a little bit, like you saw in the armor profile, you can actually get bounces, and you can improve your armor profile even further. So use that gun depression. Make sure that you are getting the angle set, and you can play peekaboom. You can play pure damage on target time, time on target damage, time for tanking, or you can just be a little bit stealthy with it. It's got a decent camo rating. It's got a solid credit coefficient. It's not amazing, but it will make you money. And I mean, it's just a really strong tank, hey. And I'd forgotten all about it. I hadn't driven it in such a long, long time. And Swiss has always championed the cause of this one. Hoodie loves the 34-85 Victory. Every time I drive a tier 6 platoon with Hoodie, he's rolling around in the T34-85 Victory. And the Rudy, if you can play the Victory, the Rudy is an even more mobile version of the Victory. It doesn't make as much money, but gee, it's a stronger pound-for-pound winner than the 34-85 Victory is. I highly recommend this tank. If you get the opportunity to get it, or you're lucky enough to get it in a crate or a large container, thank your lucky stars, because it's a prime mover as a fun tank that also does damage and earns credits. Lots of stuff coming up on channel, guys. Hope you enjoyed that little look at the 34-85 Rudy. There's a stream on today. There are constant videos and streams popping now that we've got the MBN sorted out. I'm going to be running with my good mate Snake Eyes. Make sure to look out for that. Well, this is probably going to go up afterwards, so I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, look after your families and stay safe on the battlefield.